Okay, let's look at the other type of forms that we have for linear equations. So we've already talked about slope-intercept form. Real easy, plug in the slope, plug in an intercept, and then voila, you have this beautiful equation. Standard form is a little different, although remember we said we could go back and forth. But standard form is real pretty. It's all whole numbers. Your x and y variables are on the left. Your constant term is on the right. And everything's real pretty. You know, x, y equals constant term. And over here, you can have fractions mixed in. It's y that's by itself. X is on the other side. So that's the big difference here. So standard form, I want you to think it's real pretty, right? Everything's a whole number. A is always going to be positive, depending on textbook or teacher. But A is going to be positive. So let's take a look about how do we get standard form into slope-intercept form. Well, remember back when we did multivariate equations and we were isolating for a particular variable? That's all we're doing. All we're doing is we are now going to isolate for y because we need to get y by itself. So we look over here, and how do you get y by itself? To get rid of this whole term, you subtract ax on both sides, and then I get by equals negative ax plus c. And then to get y by itself, we divide everything by b. And then I would be left with y equals negative ax plus c all over b. Remember when we isolated for y? Well, that's what we're doing, except now it's going to look a little prettier because we're not going to be dealing with just variables. Let me put that back up. Standard form, ax plus by equals c. Okay, so let's take a look at number 1. I need to get y by itself. So what do I need to do? I get rid of this positive 2x, so I'm going to subtract 2x on both sides, additive inverse. I'm clearing a term. So now I'm left with y equals negative 2x plus 3, okay? Now, could I have said y equals 3 minus 2x? Of course I can. Commutative property says it's okay. But because we want to follow the form of slope-intercept form, I want you to get used to putting it in where your slope is first and your constant term is last, okay? So now when I look at this, y equals negative 2x plus 3, I can easily identify, well, what's my slope? My slope, remember, is the coefficient of x, negative 2. My beginning point is my constant term. It's the number that stands alone, so it's 3. So now it's easily identifiable. Slope, intercept. Make sense? Okay. Let's go to another example together. Let's go to number 2. So I'm always getting y by itself because I want it in y equals mx plus b form. So I'm going to clear out this 4x to clear something out, additive inverse. So I subtract 4x on both sides. I'm left with 5y equals negative 4x minus 30. And then what do I need to do to get y by itself? Divide everything by 5. So watch what I'm doing here. I'm dividing everything by 5. And so I'm left with y equals negative 4/5 x, and negative 30 over 5 is negative 6. So that's what I'm going to box. And now I can identify my slope is negative 4/5, and my beginning point is negative 6. Okay? So go ahead and try 3 and 4 on your own. You can pause the video. I'm sure that's what you're going to be doing. And then I will work those out for you. Okay? So on number 3, y by itself. So I'm going to subtract x, additive inverse. Negative 3y equals negative x plus 12. Divide everything by negative 3. I know I'm going fast, but hopefully you've already done this, so we're just checking our work. And we're left with y equals negative divided by negative is a positive 1/3 x minus 4. Okay? Now, a lot of times students will say y equals x over 3 minus 4. And that's fine, but you still have to recognize when it's x over 3, my slope is still 1/3. Here, it's easy to identify because I'm making it like a true coefficient, right? So it's 1 over 3, but here it's still 1 over 3 because my coefficient is x is still 1. So slope is 1/3. My beginning point, my y-intercept is negative 4. Okay, that's number 3. Let's do number 4 together. All right. So I get y by itself, so subtract x on both sides. Negative y equals negative x minus 8. Divide everything by a negative 1, which is the same thing as flipping out, right? So we flip it, we flip it, we flip it. That's what it means when you divide by negative 1. So this becomes positive x, this becomes positive 8. My slope here is the coefficient of x. What's the coefficient of x? It's 1. And my beginning point, my y-intercept, is 8. Okay? Let's do number 5 just real quick because I want you to see this. I subtract 4x on both sides to get negative y equals negative 4x. Do I need to put that plus 0 in there? I don't. I don't need to. It's understood to be 0. So when I divide by a negative 1 or just flip out, I have y equals 4x. I'm not going to add the plus 0. It's not as simplified like that. But I still want to write down what's my slope. My slope is 4, the coefficient of x, and my beginning point, my y-intercept now, is going to start at 0. Okay? All right, so that should get you going to help you through your notes. If you have questions, come see me in tutoring. But that was the lesson that we would have been missing today in place of rockets. So I will give you your homework and announcements, and if you have questions, come see me.